So welcome to this morning's WLRT Women's Legislative Roundtable and the League of Women Voters of Virginia. We are pleased to have you with us here on our next to last WLRT, and I will kick it off to Mary to get started. A reminder that if you have questions, please put them into the chat.
Good morning, everyone. We are honored to have Delegate Richard Sullivan with us today, or Rip Sullivan.
My friends all call me Rip. I hope you will.
Okay. He is from the 48th District, including Arlington and Fairfax. He is Majority Caucus Chair, and he is on some very important committees, and he's Vice Chair on the Labor and Commerce Committee, which is one of the committees that considers a lot of environmental bills. He's also on the Finance Committee and the Courts of Justice Committee and the Rules Committee. I also want to thank Delegate Sullivan for introducing the HR 544 commemorating the 100th anniversary of the adoption of the 19th Amendment, and HJ 5011, which establishes Women's Suffrage Month in August. Thank you. You have the floor, or the room.
Well, good morning. It is great to see you all. I have to say this virtual thing obviously has has created a lot of challenges for us, and I'm not trying to convince people that it fully replicates a real session. But I do have to say that it has some upsides, and I consider this meeting one of those upsides. I don't know that it would have been. I'm sure it would have been inconvenient. I'm not sure it even would have happened to have all 59 of us together in one room during a regular session. It's a long trip to Richmond. It's 8:30 in the morning. For all of us to have found a way to be together somewhere in Richmond. Most of you would have had to have started driving at 6 a.m. And that that phenomenon has played out throughout this whole session, appearing in committee meetings, for instance. While of course there is something special about being there live and in person, and it helps the interaction with the members of the committee and between the members of the committee and the witness. No longer do people have to drive, in some cases, 5 hours to Richmond or 6 hours to Richmond for their 45 seconds or 90 seconds in front of a committee. They can do it from their couch. So as I said, I'm not suggesting that this method of conducting the session is as good as regular. We all miss the regular session, but it does have its participatory upsides, put it that way. And it is very nice to see all now 60 of you this morning. I don't know that we have a topic, although I think I think there was a request that this relate to environmental issues. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, that's right. And I would like to ask you if you could talk about your HB 2282.
Sure.
State Corporation Commission, transportation, sure. Electrification, utility recovery of certain costs.
Sure, Mary. I'd be happy to. You mentioned I'm on the Labor and Commerce Committee. I love my perch as vice chair to Juwan Ward, who's our wonderful chair. I'm also chair of Subcommittee 3, the sexily named Subcommittee 3, but known to most people as the Energy Subcommittee, and it is the subcommittee through which all the bills relating to energy issues in Virginia, and from my perspective, of course, most importantly, clean energy issues, renewable energy, clean energy. All those issues come through the Subcommittee 3, the Energy Subcommittee. And I may have told this group this story, and so I'm sorry to bore you with it again. But I have vivid memories in my very first session as a delegate of appearing in front of Subcommittee 3, then chaired by Delegate Terry Kilgore, from, I think is it the 1st district? Way down in the tip of Virginia, in Southwest Virginia. And I had an energy efficiency resource standard bill, a bill I put in every session since I got there. And I'll never forget the very first time I stood up in front of this committee, and Chairman Kilgore looked at me and asked Delegate Sullivan, why should Dominion have to worry about whether the Kilgore children turn their lights off at night? And I knew I was in for a very tough and short session in front of that committee. And I sort of beat my head against that committee for many years with energy efficiency bills and resource standards. Every year I put in an RPS, a renewable portfolio standard bill. I would put in all sorts of bills having to do with solar and wind and energy efficiency, all typically crashing and burning pretty quickly. And then we had a little election a couple of years ago, and the majority changed, and suddenly I was chairman of this committee, and had a particularly entertaining hearing when I was chairing a subcommittee meeting, and Delegate Kilgore, who had become a friend over the intervening 7 years or so, stood in front of me, and lo and behold, what was he pitching but an energy efficiency bill? And I teased him just a little bit, good-naturedly, reminded him of the experience I'd had in front of him those many years ago, and he chuckled and he looked at me and he said, "Well, I was wrong, Delegate Sullivan." And we had a little laugh about that. But I tell the story simply to point out that even frankly, before we had a change in control, environmental issues, and I'm not taking credit for this myself, I and a lot of others had been pushing and working hard and talking to everyone who would listen, regardless of which side of the aisle they were on. And we started to make some progress, incremental, even in some cases, begrudging progress, but we'd started to make some progress. The curve was going like this. But then we had a change of control, and the curve now is going like this. And it's one of the things I'm most pleased about with respect to our majority and the successes we've had. Last session, in my view, was an historic session from an environmental perspective in Virginia. The way I tell it, it's particularly effective in these Zoom calls. I like to say we used to be going in that direction, and now we're going in this direction, and arguing not about whether we should do these things, whether we should be moving to renewables, but instead arguing about or talking about how fast and how to do it. So I just think there's been a sea change in Virginia, and I'm really proud to have been a part of it. There is a segue here, Mary, to your question, which is 2282, because if last session's sort of signature environmental achievement was a number of bills relating to the production of energy in Virginia, there was the bill that I patroned called the Virginia Clean Economy Act. I worked with my colleague, Senator McClellan, in the Senate to get that through. It was a huge, heavy lift, but it set Virginia on that path to production of clean energy. How we're going to get there. It incorporated an energy efficiency resource standard, something I'd been pushing for years. It incorporates an RPS, a renewable portfolio standard, something I've been pushing for years. And sets us on that path and makes Virginia, frankly, a leader in the country, and the first Southern state, by the way, to sort of launch this effort toward production of clean energy. And you combine that with the RGGI bill, a bill that Delegate Keene carried called the Solar Freedom Bill. Last year's sort of signature theme from an environmental perspective was in the energy sector. This year, I'm hoping that by the time we're done, the sort of signature environmental accomplishment, there will be many, but the sort of, in my view, the signature issue will relate to electrifying our transportation system, and most particularly setting us on a path for Virginians to start driving more and more clean cars, electric vehicles. And 2282 that you asked about, Mary, is one of, again, a sort of suite of bills that I hope if we play our cards right, get a couple lucky breaks, convince our friends down the hall in the Senate, we'll come out of the session with a suite of bills that sets Virginia on a goal to get more electric vehicles on the road. My bill 2282 would require a bunch of state agencies, DEQ, Division of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, soon to be renamed, with a bill I've put in, just the Department of Energy, DEQ, the Department of Transportation, all under the auspices of the State Corporation Commission, to get together with private sector stakeholders and do a real deep dive and do some planning and policy development on how we supercharge, pardon the pun, our charging infrastructure in Virginia. Because there's just no doubt that one of the two great hurdles to getting people into electric vehicles is charging infrastructure, and the range anxiety that people have, the concern that people have that they won't be able to find a gas station to fill up, as it were. That's one of the so that's what 2282 does, and it's part of that package of bills. The other big hurdle to electrification, of course, is cost, which continues to come down. But there's a bill that my friend David Reed has, which would establish the beginnings of a rebate program in Virginia to incentivize people to be buying electric cars. There's an equity component of that we're very concerned about. The way a lot of people put it is, we're not particularly interested in giving rebates to people who have the means to already go ahead and buy an electric car, but we are trying to focus those rebates on less expensive cars and on consumers in lower income levels to try to get them out of their internal combustion cars into electric vehicles. So that's a very long-winded answer, Mary, but there is, as I said, a suite of bills that I hope by the end of this session we'll be able to point to as our signature environmental accomplishment for this particular session. So I've got my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, and rubbing my rabbit's foot.
Well, thank you. I'm going to ask our first Vice President, Joan Port, if there are any questions in the chat, because we just have a couple more minutes.
Yes, Mary, thank you. There are, the first question, Delegate Sullivan, is, do you see a connection between clean energy and campaign finance reform?
Do I see? I mean, I suppose the answer to that is always yes. I'm not sure what the questioner has in mind. The issue that comes to mind to me, of course, is become a very hot issue, has to do with Dominion's sort of outsized influence in Richmond. And there have been some bills. There's a lot of talk of restricting Dominion and other regulated industries from being able to make campaign contributions. I think I've told this group this before, but there are now pledges floating around and that sort of thing. When I got to Richmond, and as I told you, one of the issues I knew when I got there I wanted to focus on was clean energy. I announced I think it was my announcement speech. I had said I wasn't going to take any contributions from Dominion. So the way I put it is I took this position before it was cool, before anyone else was doing it. But the questioner is right. There is a concern, I think, out there, and it's a legitimate concern, that Dominion's outsized influence, particularly with regard to campaign contributions, has clearly given it an awful lot of power, and certainly in years past enabled it to be a real roadblock. But we're getting bills through now that Dominion never expected we'd be able to get through. So even there, I think we're making real progress.
Thank you. We have two questions on electric cars. Does Virginia the state purchase electric cars yet? And if so, where from? And it says, what about paying for electric, for charging stations? So I guess the state, would the state pay for charging stations?
So I'll take the second question first. My own vision is that the charging infrastructure is likely to be driven, pardon the pun, by the private sector. There is something called there's a fund of money from something called Dieselgate. You may remember the issues, particularly having to do with Volkswagen. So there's a big fund of money that's being used already to build a lot of infrastructure. But there is a lot. There's a company called EVgo, for instance, that was doing a lot of work in Virginia. These are the new gas stations, and there is an appetite in the private sector for coming in to Virginia, and assuming we've created the environment, pardon the pun, for demand. So it's two things. We got to have more cars. To have more cars, we got to have more charging stations. People are going to build more charging stations when we have cars. So there's a chicken and egg thing here, and what we need to do is both at the same time. So I don't see, my own vision is not that the state itself will be building these charging stations, but there will be passing policies that result in the private sector being, having the financial incentive to come in and do that. The first question is the state buying electric vehicles? And candidly, I don't really know. I'm not sure there's been a directive to do that yet. I think the administration has been thinking of an executive order to do that. I do think whoever asked the question, it's a very good idea. The state ought to sort of set that example. Another thing we've been working on is electrification of buses, school buses in Virginia. And my friend Delegate Keem has a bill that we've passed, also sort of a part generally of this suite of bills, that would set up a fund to help localities transition their buses from diesel to electric, which of course solves all sorts of problems, both our broader climate problem, plus we all know it's not great having our kids sitting in school buses inhaling diesel fumes. So
Joan,
a lot to go on there.
I'm afraid that we have run out of time, and we have another legislator waiting to come on next. Thank you so much, Delegate Sullivan, for all the great work you have been doing for the environment, and also for all the great work you've done on election laws too.
Well,
and
thank you for that, Mary. I'm sorry to have chewed up so much time. It's nice to have seen you all.
Quite all right.
Nice to have seen you all. Thank you for all you do. And I'm sure, see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Next, we have Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who is from District 10. And she is on several committees: the Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources Committee, the Education and Health Committee, the General Laws and Technology Committee, and Local Government. And she introduced SB 1318 for establishing an interagency environmental justice working group, which I think was just reported yesterday from Finance and Appropriations. Anyway, welcome, Senator Hashmi. You have the floor, or the room.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for this opportunity to join you. I wish we could be meeting in person, and my apologies for having the mask on. I am already in the Science Museum, and it's mandatory that we all wear a mask. But it's just a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about the environmental bills that I've been carrying. And actually, the environmental legislation has been a significant part of the 12 bill allotment that we've been given in the Senate. I have 4 bills that are directly related to environmental concerns, and then a 5th one that is really seeking to improve our capacity for equitable sewage water treatment. So I'll just share a little bit. As Mary just said, SB 1318, which establishes the Environmental Justice Working Group was reported out of Finance yesterday. It will be on the Senate floor in the next few days, but this is building on what we accomplished last year. So if you remember last year, both in the Senate and in the House, we carried a bill that actually defined what we mean by environmental justice in the Commonwealth and laid down those definitions in code for environmental justice, fence line communities, and the equitable allocation of resources when we're thinking about environmental justice in the Commonwealth. We had put the language of the interagency work group into the budget last year, and this year we're seeking now to put it into code. And so the interagency work group is composed of members from the governor's secretariats, asking that each secretary's office designate one individual or up to 3 individuals who are responsible for identifying what the environmental policies are, the impacts of any kind of state action, what the impact might be on environmental justice issues, and cooperate and work together to make sure that there is conversation and appropriate attention paid to the issues of environmental justice, whether it's from our Secretary of Natural Resources or from DEQ and any other agency. So that bill is moving forward. I'm really pleased to see that we have had good support for it. The other areas that I've been focusing on is landfill legislation. Primarily, this concern came to me from my constituents in Powhatan, who are also working with collective forces in Cumberland County. There is a mega landfill that has been proposed and is working through the permit process in Cumberland County. By a mega landfill, of course, we mean it would be receiving over 3,500 tons of waste every day. And it is out of state trash largely, because right now the mega landfills that we have in Virginia still have capacity to receive trash. So this particular mega landfill will be receiving trash from other states. And it is something that the supervisors in Cumberland County approved. They see it as an economic development opportunity, but there are a significant number of folks who live in Cumberland County, a lot of people who live in Powhatan County who are seeking to stop the landfill because of the impacts that we would have on soil and water and air quality. So our first bill is SB 1186, and that is really fleshing out the language for historic preservation. We already have in code that as part of the consideration for establishing a landfill, we need to look at the impact it would have on water, on underground systems, as well as rivers and streams. We have language about assessment of impact on land and leaching. And we also have just a statement that it should take into consideration historic sites. So we've taken that language and fleshed it out and said that if a landfill is in close proximity within 3 miles or so of a historic site, that has to be part of the permitting process and the consideration. And so this particular landfill is impacting a historic Rosenwald school, the Pine Grove School, which was one of the first African-American schools established to educate children in that area. And it's over 100 years old. It has been placed on the Registry of Endangered Historic Sites, and we're seeking to preserve that particular bill. The other bill is focusing on, it's SB 1200, and it is asking localities to engage in partnership and cooperation as they're considering the permitting of a landfill. Right now, a locality has the independent authority to establish a landfill without any kind of regional cooperation. And I personally think that that's just wrong. We know that environmental impact does not respect county boundaries, and it sure doesn't decrease the impact that it would have on adjacent localities. And the residents of Powhatan had no say-so, no voice in the permitting of a landfill that is right at the boundary between these two counties. So we're asking that there be more of a regional consideration rather than a local process in establishing a landfill. The other bill is SB 1319, and this focuses on solid waste management and recycling. It is really asking for a study, a comprehensive study of how we are managing solid waste in Virginia and what our next steps need to be in particular regard to recycling, have a more comprehensive effort about the recycling processes in Virginia. This particular bill is also looking at organic waste. How can we more effectively divert organic waste, which is a significant part of our solid waste? How can we divert it out of our landfills and make sure that it is more effectively used for composting and for not just filling up the landfills that we have. So that is asking for a study. And then the final bill is SB 1396, which is an administration bill, and it is giving funding to those underserved communities, those historically disadvantaged communities, to upgrade sewage water treatment, improve the septic systems, be able to allocate funds so that we have more better access for sewage water treatment in our poor communities. So that is working its way too. And in fact, at 9 o'clock in 2 minutes, I have to head out of here. I'm going to be presenting that bill to the Finance Committee and asking for them their support so that we can bring it to the floor. So that's up in just 2 minutes then.
Well, thank you. We might just have time for 1 or 2 questions. Joan, are there some questions in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. We have gotten several questions about advanced recycling. Do you define advanced recycling as manufacturing? Several people have asked that question.
I know we have a bill in the Senate that we haven't heard yet on the advanced recycling, and I don't see it as manufacturing, and I see it as a significant concern for environmental impacts, particularly with regard to the chemicals that are released, the toxins that can continue to impact, especially our air quality, water quality. And so I'm looking carefully at that bill, and I will probably be opposing the Senate bill that is coming. I think it's in Ag on Thursday.
We only
One
have
more?
30 seconds, so we don't have time for another question.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving a little of your time to us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was wonderful to see everybody.
Have a good day.
I hope you have a good day.
Next, we have Queen Zakia Shabazz. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is coordinator of the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative. And I would love to hear what environmental justice is all about and what this collaborative does.
Thank you so much.
Well, welcome. You have the floor in the room.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm Queen Shabazz. I serve as coordinator for the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative, and I'm also founder of United Parents Against Lead, which addresses childhood lead poisoning. And so the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative is composed of 35 member organizations across the state of Virginia that's dealing on various EJ issues and environmental justice communities. We were successful in getting the Environmental Justice Act passed in 2020, VAEJC 2020, working with Senator Hashmi and Delegate King. This year, we're seeking to strengthen that act and make sure that all of the state agencies have an environmental justice lens in their work. We've been having a bit of difficulty dealing with administration and getting our bill to go through the committees and get passed. They're kind of stuck on the words cumulative impacts. Our bill is House Bill 2074. Delegate Simons is the patron on it this year. And basically the cumulative impact just means, first, do no harm. If we can all take the oath that doctors take. And so we have people in local communities, local bodies that's actually passing these bills even before they get to the state level to say we'll have a, take the landfill, for instance, that Pine Grove is, and Cumberland County, those are communities that the collaborative have supported. We've worked and we were successful in stopping the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the compressor station that was proposed to be placed there. So I see someone put in the chat about, it's interesting, it's from Linda Rice, interesting that the landfill is in the same county as proposed advanced recycling. Yes, because once these corporations target a community, they're called Sorrel communities. These are communities that they specifically look at and decide and determine that these communities will not have any voice or any power to fight them back or any power to oppose against what's being proposed to come into their lands. So what the collaborative has been doing over the past 4 or 5 years is giving these communities, amplifying the voices of those communities so that they do hear. And a prime example, again, is stopping the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We're working in a community called Brown Grove, where they're also proposing to put gas-fired plants, and not one, but 2. Brown Grove, similar to Pine Grove, similar to Union Hill, all freedmen communities, all communities of Black and Indigenous people that's living there that have burned the brunt of environmental justice and have the least say of what happens in those communities. So the collaborative has been amplifying those voices, standing with those communities, writing letters on their behalf and opposing, like the Wegmans distribution center that's planned for Brown Grove. And we're starting to see these, all over the state, these type of communities all over the state. So that's why it's important that we get a House Bill 2074 passed. We wanted to, to be strong. We wanted to, we want all the state agencies to make sure that they're looking at things through an environmental justice lens and not just saying, we're going to go along with the corporation because they tell us they're going to bring jobs. That's usually the big catch. We're bringing jobs, even though it may only be 5 or 10 jobs, but that does not balance out with all of the years and the lasting harm that's done in the lives, that are lost as a result. So environmental justice, when we talk about environmental justice, we must take into consideration the whole of the community. And that's to include the natural, which we always see, let's save the trees, save the air, save the wind. But what good is all of that beauty and saving that if all the people are going to be dead? So we want to include the natural, the cultural, the social, the economic and political components of a community. So taking into consideration the whole of a community and people that reside in those communities. And we definitely support the bills that Senator Hashmi just spoke of in those landfills. We participated in an extensive report that was that the state contracted with SKIO to perform. And we just want the administration to follow the recommendations of those reports, follow the things that they say they were going to do in terms of environmental justice. And so we just want to hold them accountable to that and make sure that, that lives are saved. We have to sometimes take the political aspirations out of the place of this and just do things because it's the right thing to do and because we're saving lives. And yes, Ms. Murphy, it does head to the floor. I believe it's going to be heard on, they kept changing the date, on tomorrow morning should be heard. And we will be sending out notices and talking points. Thanks for your question, Ms. Murray. Thank you.
Joan, are there any other questions?
Yes, thank you. There's another question. How long has the collaborative been in existence?
Yes, Kimberly is correct. Since 2015, we formed with just 4 organizations. I've been serving as coordinator since 2018, and now we've grown to 35 member organizations.
Now, there's a few comments. Is the state report publicly available about environmental justice?
Well, we are still waiting for the report from the Interagency Working Group, which was created with our 2020 Environmental Justice Act. That report was supposed to have been released on December 1st. We still have not gotten it yet. And so, no, but if you're referring to the SKIO report, that is available and we can share that with you.
Okay. This was a question for the senator, but you may be able to answer it. What are the prospects for Virginia to fully implement the Transportation Climate Initiative?
The Transportation Climate Initiative, that is an issue that we've recently began to work on. I'm not sure of any of the bills that are in this year because I've been so focused on 2074. But the collaborative, we are a member of the team process and forth to talk about access to electric vehicles. And so I know that the governor has said he would support that maybe a year ago. And so we're just exploring that as a collaborative.
Mary, I don't see any other questions in chat.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning and wishing you much success with all your endeavors and have a great day.
Thank you all too. Blessings to you. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Carolyn Caywood, who is League of Women Voters Virginia Environment Issue Group leader. And she's also wonderful at managing our social media. She does a wonderful job with our League of Women Voters Virginia Facebook page. And I recommend all of you to check it out. Carolyn, you have the floor and the room.
Thanks, Mary. I want to make it clear, I am not chair of the environmental issue group. I have been in the past. We've been handing the job around and it is currently open. We're one of the state issue groups. Each one seems to be carving a bit of its own path, but they all have in common that we look at the state's positions, we track legislation, we educate ourselves and the public. The Environmental Issue Group has 36 members as of yesterday. And we're scheduled to meet on the first Wednesday of the month. The next meeting is 6 p.m. today. So if you would like to join that meeting today and get to see how we operate, get in touch with Joan. Well, it's not going to cooperate. Joan, perhaps you would put the link in to request to join the meeting. We've got an active Google group list where we email back and forth. We share things we've heard about, legislation we're tracking, events we've become aware of. And I have to say, I really like the way the issue groups are connecting league members across Virginia outside of your own local league. Because sometimes you don't have that many people that share your interest within your league. Or maybe you just want to get to know more Virginians. We are, as I said, educating ourselves. We've had several webinars. The most recent one was on Project Drawdown. And though I had been using their website, I learned a lot from that webinar. We have been tracking important environmental bills and as individuals advocating for environmental issues. We've provided feedback on environmental priorities to the action chair. We've called specific bills to the attention of action. And if we're going to review the league positions, we need to get at it right this evening. We need to make sure that they do reflect the latest science and also that they look at things through a DEI lens. That's not necessarily a viewpoint that was around and available in our awareness when the positions were written. So that's a new perspective for us to bring to positions. So we'll be talking about all of that at 6 p.m. this evening. And we will get you back, Carolyn. That sounds interesting. I hope to see some of you there. Thank you.
Any other questions from the chat?
No, Mary, there's not. I was trying to put the link in. I was trying to find the bit.ly link, but that is the link to sign up for all issue groups, or you could just email me. It would be just as easy, and I'll make sure you get on the list.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I am going to invite Tim Cywinski, who has been a longtime fan of the Women's Legislative Roundtables, and he is now working for Sierra Club as communications director. Tim, if you're in the room, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to everyone here as well, and just to the league in general. The one constant that Sierra could count on is that the League of Women Voters still has its legislative roundtable. So it's been a nice, nostalgic experience to be able to participate in these and be able to speak today. So as Mary mentioned, I'm a big fan and always just inspired by the work that you all do and the level of engagement that you all are a part of. So as Mary mentioned, I'm the communications person for the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. Unfortunately, my background is not in environmental sciences, but I hopefully am good at communication. So I tell a lot of people that even though I'm pretty well versed in all of these things, I'm the person who knows the least but has to talk the most. So I'll try to run through our legislative priorities, what we're focused on, and if I had to connect them to a theme, it would be to improving the health of communities as it relates to environmentalism, environmental justice, which there's no one better than Queen to talk about the legislation there. So I'll skip over those ones. But also stopping pollution or the expansion of pollution, as someone mentioned already, advanced recycling bills, and doing our best to combat a utility system that really should be reformed. And I know Delegate Sullivan already mentioned some things about the rate reforms bills, but I'll say on the predominant focus right now for a lot of the folks in the environmental community is transportation. Transportation is the #1 cause of climate pollution in Virginia. Encapsulates, I think, 43% last checked, and 43% of all of our carbon pollution. So it's more than all of our entire power sector. It is also a huge burden on our air quality. a report from the Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action on Virginia's transportation system said that it can relate between 700 to 2,000 premature deaths because of air pollution caused by transportation. Across the country, there are more premature deaths caused by transportation pollution than there are traffic accidents. That's the one statistic that I heard that I thought makes transportation, which is seemingly more abstract, more real about how much it is actually impacting the health of Virginians and the health of just really our larger community. It also disproportionately affects communities of color. A Black American is 3 times more likely to suffer, to suffer respiratory illness than a white American. Largely part of that has to do with institutionalized discrimination that has made sure that the places that are mostly impacted by air quality from our transportation sector are also the places that are mostly populated by communities of color. So one of the ways that we can help address our transportation policy, our transportation pollution problem, which is really just contributing to an air quality crisis across the Commonwealth that is disproportionately impacting different communities, but is through the clean car standards, which is of course just making sure that all cars being manufactured and sold in Virginia reach a certain amount of standards through either zero emission vehicles or lower emission vehicles. A couple of things about this is that it does not raise taxes, and it is a budget neutral bill. It has no cost on the fiscal impact. So it's a pretty common sense approach. California has already done something like this, and it's good for a variety of reasons. Mainly among them is that most people, a poll said that 7 out of 10 Virginians would like to buy an electric vehicle, but we have a limited amount of access to it. And if it's because manufacturers of them are prioritizing states with these type of vehicle standards inside of them. So that's one of the reasons that we're supporting and really focusing on clean car standards, is because more clean cars on the road equals better health outcomes, equals less transportation pollution. So, but that's on the individual level. On the larger level, we really need to make sure that there is clean public transportation that does not impact the health of our communities. And when it comes to public transportation, especially our children when they're getting to school as well, make sure that those communities they reside in are not being impacted. So one of the ways that we need to look about doing that is to really understand the entire scope of our transportation system in Virginia. And so one of the ones we're excited about is a bill that would commission a study called the Transit Modernization Study. And this is different from studies that we've done before. This is not about reducing congested traffic. Thank you. HB 1965 is the clean car standards, Mary. Appreciate that. See, should have mentioned that one. But the Transit Modernization Study, which is HJ 542, really looks at an entire encompassing look at our transportation system. So it's not just about what is the type of infrastructure we need on the roads, but also how do we make sure that our system is equitable? How do we make sure that people who rely on these, on our public transportation system can get to work on time consistently, can visit loved ones consistently, can have access to the hospital and grocery stores, et cetera. It also looks at the workforce that embodies our transit system, and also looks at making sure that we have appropriate rider representation on the governing boards and commissions that relate back to our transportation system. So Queen spoke a lot about equity and environmental justice. This, I think, fits into that framework because it's about actually increasing the amount of representation and increasing the people who have historically not had a voice at the table and making sure they're part of it. So we don't know the best ways to implement that as of right now, but hopefully the Transit Modernization Study will illuminate all of the benchmarks and immediate actions we can take to make sure that our transit system is there. So from there, that's on transportation. Again, that's reducing pollution. There was some mention about the advanced recycling bill, so I guess I'll address that. We are concerned about that. I think someone put in parentheses the plastic burning bills, and I do want to make this very clear that this process that involved with chemical recycling is heated at such a high temperature that it changes the substance of what it's heating. So plastic burning bills is an appropriate description to describe it. It is carbon intensive. It is terrible for health quality. I mean, it's essentially, think about throwing a plastic bottle into a bonfire. You wouldn't want to breathe that smoke in. So why would we want to send a signal to the industry that is based on this, which, by the way, is also not economically viable? Most existing plants of this do not have a great output, and they do not provide a lot of economic activity that benefits the communities. So why would we want to send a signal to them? So that's why we are specifically focused on making sure that these bills are done. Although we are excited that our legislators are taking an interest in recycling, and hopefully we can work with them in figuring out how to create a good system around that. On that same vein, and some discussion on landfills, where there's a styrofoam ban that needs to be passed 2 times. It was passed last year. This is about the food industry and restaurants, making sure that they can't, they would no longer be allowed to have, to use styrofoam by 2023. By 2023, no longer to phase out use of styrofoam. Again, it seems like a harmless thing, but especially in landfills, styrofoam releases a lot of chemicals. It damages air quality just by being out in the sun. It's one of the reasons styrofoam is so harmful, but seemingly harmless. So it really does impact the health of our communities, our climate, and just our environment at large. Hopefully no one else has spoke about the rate reform legislation. The styrofoam bill, by the way, is HB 1902. So we've passed it last year, but there was a clause in that said we had to pass it this year as well. So hopefully it will be fine, but we want to make sure that it still passes. So last I'll talk about is the rate reform legislation. Clean Virginia has been more on the lead on this, but we are certainly supporting these. They found through a study through either the SEC or another state oversight agency that Dominion Energy in particular has overcharged customers to the tune of $500 million between 2017 and 2019. Especially during a pandemic, we need some rate reform bills to make sure that the people who are in dire need of economic relief are not being constantly overcharged by customers or by utilities. And again, we're talking about a monopoly utility. We cannot choose, people in Dominion territory like myself can't choose to go somewhere else. So we want to make sure that there's appropriate oversight. There is a handful of legislation related to rate reforms. I'll give a few out since I see people taking notes, but there's HB 2200, HB 1984, HB 1835, and HB 1914. These are all pieces of legislation that are helping restore oversight over our monopoly utilities, as well as making sure that there are guardrails in place that help ensure that the overcharges aren't really, that there isn't as outrageous of an overcharge charging system as we have right now. Okay, so I don't want to filibuster in case there's any questions, but thank you for listening to my coffee fueled rant.
Joan, do we have some questions?
We do. There's a question about gold mining. And does gold mining have a cyanide issue?
That is a good question. And I'm looking at our bill tracker right now. I know that we have something on there, and I don't know if it's related to toxics or not. Cyanide issue, I believe, is part of the process of the mining, the type of mining that one of the bills addresses. We are on top of it, just not one of the bills that I familiarized myself with. But one of the reasons I love talking to the league is that you're always challenging me to be better. So I'll leave my contact information in the chat box, and I'm happy to follow up with anyone who wants to answer that question.
This is an interesting one. What are the top environmental issues for Virginia? It sounds like there's many, but.
Sure. So I think the top environmental issue right now relates back to pollution and the lack of representation about who is targeted by pollution and who makes the decision. And will relate, I believe this is the best way to describe it, because this relates back to climate change, because the same projects that are fueling the climate crisis are also fueling, frankly, racist implementation of our utility and power system in Virginia. The same people, the same forces that ensure that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by this are the same forces that are fueling our climate crisis. So that's one of the biggest things. I think these environmental justice issues are a great way to make sure that we're not just having a lens of environmental justice, but also making sure that people with the appropriate backgrounds have a say. When it comes to pollution, if we're just going to look at that in more of a siloed view, transportation, as I mentioned, is the #1 cause of carbon pollution, also air quality. Then you have the power sector, which was kind of addressed by the Virginia Clean Economy Act last year that mandated that we go 100% renewable by 2050. And the other side of things, you have agriculture and just different agriculture processes. And that's also a very carbon intensive process. That is also more of a complex issue that needs to be studied, and it can't be a universal approach. It's not as straightforward as saying we just need to have clean car standards to address this, or we need to adopt more or expand clean energy. And we also need, again, to make sure that there's the underlying focus of equity and justice in all of these things. As long as we are moving fast, but not checking in with the appropriate parties, then we're going to make the same mistakes we did by developing the current utility system and current energy system, current agriculture system, current transportation system as we are. So lack of representation is actually one of the best ways that we can do this. I think in storing a justice lens is environmentalism, and I don't think those two things can be separated from one another.
There's a question on the prospect of HJ 542, which is the Transit Equity and Modernization Bill. It's passed the House. What are the chances in the Senate?
If I had more of a success in my prediction models, I would probably own my own consulting firm right now. So I don't want to speculate, but I will say that I think these are pretty good chances. Studies are pretty hard to say no to, especially one that has what seems seemingly as many benefits as this one. So it would be surprising to me. Well, it wouldn't be surprising to me if it died in committee, but I don't think it will. But that's kind of where hopeful legislation has the biggest challenge in the Senate anyway.
Okay, you need to put your predictor hat on again. They want to know the status of the advanced recycling bill in the Senate.
I believe it's up for a floor vote this week, but I do not know the day. And I do think, on good news on the House side, there was a vote that was scheduled for a floor vote, but it did get postponed, and I think that's because of some of the attention that was raised by it. So we are eager and optimistic about the changes for these type of bills, if not just having them be. But I think there's things in the work that's going on to address the elements in this bill that are very concerning.
If we have time for one more, there's a question about the clean water impacts. Should clean water impact have higher attention?
Sure. So I should mention, everything that I've talked about too, and even with the transportation, styrofoam, everything really, and also just oversight on our utilities, it does come back also to water. I've been mentioning air particularly because air particulate matter is one of the things that we can connect to a lot of the public health impacts, but water quality is absolutely one of them. We are, of course, supporting the pipeline bills, which deal with erosion when it comes to changes or any sudden changes into the construction process, as well as the water quality control. So when I mention these things kind of in the broad sense, obviously they get down to the specifics of how does this exactly impact our environment, including our water or air or conservation issues. But I just want to make sure that these things were looked at kind of in a linear way as well, to make sure that they're tied to a theme of everything about other elements that how to demonstrate the intersectionality and the interconnectedness of the environment with other issues. Because as I said, they can't be separated. But yeah, water protections is kind of is a top motivation for all of us to make sure that the bills that we support, are protecting those type of, well, no pun intended, but elements as well. So.
Thank you so much, Tim, for
Thank you,
joining
Mary.
us today. It's great to see you again, and thank you for sharing Sierra Club legislative priorities with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the excuse to dress up. My fiance was tired of seeing me in sweatpants all the time.
Oh, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you all for joining us. I want to just share with you that if you're interested, a local chapter of Sierra Club, which is called Falls of the James Group, are sponsoring an environmental film festival, and it's free and it's virtual, of course. And it starts on February 12th. And anybody who's interested can go to the website rvaeff.org and register for each of the films separately. And I think they have trailers. Anyway, for all of those who are interested in environmental issues, they do put on some wonderful films. I have been to see some of their films in the past couple of years myself, and I was very impressed. If Deb Wake, our president, is still in the room,
Of course.
would
So
you
thank
like
you all
to
for,
wrap this up for us?
I would. Thank you all for joining us for the WLRT this morning. We will have a recording of it that we will post on our website if you missed something and you want to go back and see it again. And a reminder that we do have one more WLRT for next week because we are still in session and we just couldn't get it all in the 4 that we had scheduled initially. So please sign up. Please contact your legislators about the important legislation that you've heard about today. Remember that you have the power to speak as a constituent and a voter. So have a great day. And if you need talking points, we do have some on our website as well. Thank you.
Thank you.